Hello again there, coffee chat friend. A few comments on here about comments I've been getting a little bit on Facebook. And some people seem to be surprised. I mean, I do have two or three people actually look at some of my posts. Surprised that by their impression that I'm somehow this Trump supporter all of a sudden. And I have to, in fact, somebody asked me that directly, as in a visit recently, and I had to explain what I have explained to others, that no, I do not support Donald Trump. As I have explained, this, from my impression anyways, this election was so amazingly important because it dismantled the mainstream narrative, right? We saw, those of us who haven't been in echo chambers, that is, or at least expanded echo chambers, so we could hear echoes from other places. We saw the mainstream narrative, the propaganda coming out of the non-journalists who were trying to feed a certain direction, get everybody running in the same direction. We saw that get dismantled through WikiLeaks, Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, other people working. And in fact, the so-called conspiracy theorists had come out largely on top as having the underlying truth from the beginning. And what was so amazing about this, is that the support for Trump could see outside of the echo chamber, right? But those within, they seem to be completely convinced that Hillary was going to win up to the last minute. And they were so convinced, and they're so isolated from any other form of reality, that some of them had to resort to crying. It's really amazing, including Hillary herself, apparently, right? Wasn't even able to come out and give a concession speech to her own supporters. It's just amazing, pathetic. And this, I mean, people who supported her, you wanted this to be your leader, and come on, you know. But anyways, I wanted to talk about, you know, even though it sounds, I get it. For those who are stuck into the statist paradigm, it sounds like I am a supporter of Donald Trump. But I'm not. What I want to do is I want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate in a situation where things are slanted to one way, right? When everything in the mainstream was slanted towards, to the point where the echo chamber believed its own biased polling, right? But those outside the narrative, like myself, could see that Trump was polling ahead in the real polls that were done by real journalists, and by the crowds, and the number of signs, and the number of people who showed up in the primaries, and all that sort of thing. We could see that it was going Trump's way long ago, right? But everybody thought we were complete jackasses. But just because I'm an observer of something doesn't mean I support it. And here's why, right? I used this example the other night of how the system itself, the system that says that you have the right to vote for somebody else's enslavement, that is a corrupt system. So it doesn't matter who you put in it. It's like if you have shit soup, it doesn't matter how much you flavor it up. It might be a little bit more flavorful shit soup, don't get me wrong, but it's still shit soup, right? And it's going to remain that. So no matter who gets in, I mean, I certainly concede that I liked the character of Donald Trump more than the character of Hillary Clinton, for sure. But nevertheless, either one, and even though I think Donald Trump is less tyrannical by nature, he is entering a tyrannical system. And therefore, in order for him to be an actor in that, he will have to be the captain of a tyrannical system, right? Just a less tyrannical system. But, you know, if you have a murderer who murders fewer people, it still doesn't mean he's a nice guy, right? But I would prefer, of course, I prefer a guy to murder fewer people, of course, right? That's a no-brainer. But I'm not going to support it, right? I'm just going to watch the information around it. That's what I'm doing here. Now, just as a reminder here, if anybody's wondering, for those of you who don't know, I just in September completed an 8,000 kilometer walk for freedom, solo with a backpack, right? So I'm not just blowing out my ass here that I don't believe in freedom. I certainly do, and that was a great effort to try to get some awareness out there about how important freedom is. So that's not tooting my own horn or anything. Just to give some little bit of a credential here, that I'm not just talking about freedom like I just arrived at this. No, this has been a long process for me, and I feel very, very strongly about it. But I want to see things for what they are, right? Somebody's getting in, right? And it's a tyrannical system. Now, of course, would I prefer a less tyrannical tyrant in the tyrannical system? Of course, right? Because it allows us a little bit more freedom to kick the can down the road a little bit more, and hopefully the system will stay together a bit longer. Under Hillary, I think it would have imploded pretty fast. Under Donald, I don't know. Maybe it'll last a bit longer once these funded goons, these supporters of Hillary, these highly educated ones that were told by the media, there's the educated people who are voting for Hillary, remember? Now they're all protesting in the streets, causing violence, and probably being funded by George Soros. But once that all calms down and they realize that their money is run out, George Soros isn't giving them any more money, then I think there's a chance for a little bit more stability, but doesn't make it right. And I actually remember a few years ago, there was a guy named Dean Clifford. Some of you guys know Dean. And he did a talk one time about how he told people, watch out for this. He said, what's going to happen in the future, probably, is once enough people begin to wake up to the tyranny that is government, all government is tyranny, that what'll happen is the government system, somebody will arrive as a white knight, as a savior, that'll say, you know what, vote for me and I'll make it good again. I'll make things great again. But you see, the problem is, it didn't work in the first time. And even if Trump was to clean it up and bring it right back to the Constitution, right, he ain't going to be there forever. So what's going to happen is the corruption will creep right back in again, right? It'll creep right back in again, so it'll just delay the inevitable. The inevitable is coming. The system is designed to crash. You can only have a slave system for so long, and it will crash. Doug Casey, some of you know Doug Casey, he said a similar thing. He said, you know what, I prefer that Trump would win, but it's going to be a disaster anyways, in the end. In the end, it's inevitable. It's going to be a disaster, no matter who gets in, because the system is designed for disaster. It relies on debt, racking debt, and eventually it's going to crash, right? 20 trillion debt, 10 trillion through Obama. Come on. To use the words of Obama, come on, people. This can't last. It can't last. And if you want to really see the nature, a good argument for the nature of government, I'd recommend a read of Larkin Rose's The Most Dangerous Superstition or Lysander Spooner's No Treason. And these are basically treatises, if you will, on the nature of government. And all government is tyranny. You know, if you have a king or a despot or an individual or a cabal of individuals running it, no matter what the stripe is, fascism, communism, theocracy, monarchy, whatever you call it, whatever label you put on it, doesn't really matter what you put on it. It's these guys or a couple of guys at the top tell everybody else what to do, right? At whim. Or if you replace that by some sort of a mythical thing called the people, it's still that. It's still just a larger group telling so half the people voted for this guy, now this guy gets to rule everybody, right? And that's why it's tyrannical, because those who didn't vote for him, or those who didn't vote at all because they feel the system is evil, they get ruled not by consent, but by brute force, because that's the nature of government. All government is brute force. It doesn't negotiate with you. It says, this is the rule. If you don't do it, we're going to send somebody with a gun, right? And it's just a varying degree of how totalitarian that is, how polite it is, right? Some it's summary execution behind a boxcar. Other ones, they get black-robed people to come out and give all kinds of religious ceremonies and hear ye and put orders and arrest orders and all this sort of thing out there to make it official and sign documents and so on. And it's a big ritual and a cloak and dagger. But in the end, though, do I support Trump? Of course not. I mean, if anybody who knows me knows that my nature is voluntary, right? Voluntary means we get to trade freely, right? If you've got an idea, you're free to express it to me if I'm interested. You know, if you got a pencil you want to give to me for something else, we'll exchange. We exchange ideas, we exchange thoughts, we exchange goods, but we do it voluntarily, right? As soon as you have any form of government come along, as we know it, I'm not talking about a Toastmasters group where everybody joins voluntarily, and if they don't like it, they can leave. I'm talking about nation states where somebody is born within a geographic region, and then somebody claims, or the group of people, whatever, claim to have authority over his or her actions, regardless of whether he or she's harming anybody, right? And say, if you make a certain amount of money, you have to give it to here. Well, how is that any different than slavery, right? It's not. And Lysander Spooner in No Treason, he talks about how the Constitution even has no authority over anybody. Think about the U.S. Constitution. It's a document that a couple of guys in a closed room in a secret society, whatever, drew up. Nobody ever signed it. So nobody knows who agreed to it. And then the claim is that everybody agreed to it. Well, you know, any other contract, any other form of contract is, you got to prove that somebody agreed, right? So you come along and you say to somebody, well, you have to do this and you have to do that. Well, where is it that I agreed? In any other situation, you have to have an agreement in place. Except for government. Government presumes that they're in agreement with you. And their ideas are so damn good that you can be shot for it, right? There's no need to negotiate. It's just the way it is. Because, hey, 50% of people voted, or less than 50%. So the other 50%, by that nature, have consented, right? And yeah, I don't even vote, actually, just to give you, this is how, even if I was down there eligible to vote for Trump or Clinton, I wouldn't vote for either, right? Because I don't vote. Because what happens is when you vote, you're giving authority to that tyranny, right? So if I voted for Clinton, even if Trump won, I was betting, I was in the game, right? So I agreed to the game. In a way, it's sort of like an agreement. It's like a tacit agreement. Didn't sign an actual document, but went in and legitimized by saying, hey, I'm going to vote for my candidate, what I call my candidate. But that means that I would agree that if that candidate won, right? Everybody agrees that the candidate they vote for, if they win, then that's legitimate, right? But surely a reasonable individual is going to agree that if it's all fair, then if more people vote on the other side, then it has to be fair that theirs is. So you're agreeing that the winner gets to govern you, right? But what about those who don't? Who are conscientious objectors, as I am? I'm a conscientious objector to this war. And the war is called democracy. The war is called tyranny. The war is a bunch of people saying that through this mythical thing called the state, we have the right to govern you. Right? And that is not okay with me. It is not okay with me. Just like slavery said, I have the right to own somebody else. And that was the case for eons. Right? Finally enough people said, you know what? It's not acceptable anymore. And I've come to that place with governance. Is governance has to be voluntary, or it is always illegitimate. Donald Trump, in my mind, is an illegitimate governor. As illegitimate as he is, though, I think he is not as tyrannical in nature. I think he wasn't spanked as a child, for example. He had a fairly good family. I don't know what Clinton had either. But just looking at their track records of how they behaved throughout their lives, Donald Trump appears to me to be less of a tyrant. But nevertheless, he will work inside a tyrannical system. Therefore, I cannot possibly support him. But I did support those who were looking into the media corruption and calling that out. Steve here again. Great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.